What is up, YouTube? Back in the garage. Today is an exciting day. We are working on the MR2 and I finally get to put together a system that I've been working on for the last few weeks. I've been accumulating parts and they are all here. We can finish the system, and that is the air intercooler system. So these mid-engine cars, because the engine is in the back with all of the exhaust and everything, which also means your intake is in the back with all of the exhaust and everything, there's a lot of heat back in the back of the car. And as you probably know, if you're into cars, you need to keep your intake temperatures cool, because high intake temperatures result in detonation, which results in knock, which can destroy your engine. So the whole point is to keep your intake temperatures cool, which means you can force more air in and ultimately create more power, which is, I guess, the main goal whenever you are supercharging your MR2. So you have all of this heat back here in the engine bay. And originally I was gonna put a little top mount intercooler right here. I'll throw a picture up on the screen. I actually bought the intercooler and kind of mocked it up, got an idea for it, and threw the idea into the MR2 Spyder Facebook group, which I'm glad I did, because a lot of people who already have the experience with these cars, boosting them, gave me their input, told me it was a bad idea. So I scrapped the idea and decided to go with a water to air intercooler system. So to put together a water to air intercooler system, there are the main components you're gonna need, and that's what I'm gonna go over. I did do the system on a budget, so I purchased all budget parts that I think are gonna work just fine, and they're very affordable and actually make this setup not that much more expensive than an air-to-air intercooler. That's why I decided to go this route, because it is relatively cost-effective if you don't go way over the top on name brand parts. And just a reminder, I'm only planning on making about 8 pounds of boost on this 2ZZ, so there was no reason to go over the top on these parts. An air-to-air intercooler probably would have handled the boost that I was gonna make. So these budget parts may or may not work on a very high, boost, high horsepower car, but for this application, they're gonna work just fine. So the first component is the main component, and that is the water to air intercooler. So basically what you have here is a big heat exchanger with the fins and the heat exchanger on the inside, and you run water through those fins and that heat exchanger to cool the air that is running through this inlet and through the outlet. Pretty self-explanatory. It's pretty much the same as a radiator, except for instead of cooling the water with the air, you're cooling the air with the water. But to make this work, you need to have cool water flowing through it, or else you're just gonna heat soak the whole system and you're gonna have hot coolant heating up the hot air, and it's just not gonna do anything for you. So what you need to do is grab that cool air from the front of the car and mount a heat exchanger or radiator on the front of the car, which is gonna take the cool air flowing from the front of the car. That air is gonna blow through the fins, and you're gonna have water running through the radiator, and that air that is cooling the fins is then gonna cool the water going through. So what that means is you have this big water to air intercooler in the back of the car, the heat exchanger on the front of the car, and you need to connect the front to the back, and you need some way to circulate that water the whole way through. So 3/4 inch heater hose. I've seen some people use like copper piping and stuff. I just went with straight heater hose. It's a pretty short car, so I figure if I tuck it up nicely, not gonna have any issues up there. And then to pump the water through, I got this Bosch Pump. This is, I'd say, the smaller of the two main ones that people buy. The one you usually see is the all black one that runs about $100. This one is OEM from a different car that is more in the $60 range. So from what I've read, this size pump will do plenty of pumping and is actually probably overkill for this type of system. So that's what I'm gonna use. And I have some relays ready to go to hook that up, which we're gonna do today. And then I also have an expansion tank that will allow the hot coolant, if it does heat up that much, to expand, contract in the system, and not, over pressurize the system. So I'm gonna go ahead and get started. The goal is to get this all on the car and have a functioning pumping water to air intercooler system on the car by the end of this video. So that's gonna include some wiring, some mounting, some more mounting, some plumbing, and yeah, we're gonna run out of time quick, so I'm gonna go ahead and get started. Also, I probably should mention that if you hear crickets in the background, I'm not that boring. We just have crickets in the garage, so I promise. right, now that that is mounted, it is time to run some lines to the back of the car. So what I'm gonna start doing is fishing this line up through the car. The intercooler is gonna be about here, and then the expansion tank is gonna be around here somewhere as well. So I need my hoses to end up here and run the whole way up to the heat exchanger that I just mounted. All right, now I got one line routed up here to the heat exchanger. Before I route the other one, I want to go ahead and mount my pump. So the main idea with the pump is to make sure it's lower than your expansion tank. If you get your pump higher than your outlet of your expansion tank, you will most likely get air into your pump, and then it'll cavitate and won't pump well. So because my expansion tank is going to be up at the top of my engine bay, I can pretty much mount it under the car and won't have to worry about it. So that's what I'm going to do. All right, guys, did a little bit of work here off camera. So I got my expansion tank mounted, got that in, and then I went ahead and ran my second hose. So basically what we're looking at here, this is the top of the expansion tank, so that'll be the inlet, and then this hose is the outlet of the expansion tank, which runs the whole way back up to the heat exchanger. And then I pulled my intercooler out of the car. I made some marks here of where I need my NPT to bar adapters to end up. I'll seal those up before I put that back in, and then what I need to do is start making some mounts basically to hold that thing in. And I'm gonna just utilize my battery tray because the battery will be going somewhere else. But yeah, I'm actually gonna call it for today. So I didn't quite get as much done as I wanted to, but I'll pick it back up and you'll see that right now. Back at it. I don't know where I left off the first half of this video, but all I know is I need to make mounts for this thing to mount in my engine bay. And the plan is to mount it off of these holes here. There's one on each side. Those holes go straight through into the actual intake. So you can see it actually goes in there, which is odd because if something leaks out of there, you know, you're probably losing boost and you have a boost leak. But that's where I've seen everybody mount it. So I'm gonna get some bolts and put some RTV in them and make sure they seal up fine. And I'm gonna mount it from there. Oh yeah. All right, guys, so here is what I came up with. I have this little angle bracket to mount this one side to my battery tray. And then I actually decided to not mount the other side. So I just stuck a bolt in there with some RTV to seal off that hole. And I think the plan is with the couplers and everything and the one side bolted down and the battery tray helping support, the one side being supported, I think will be plenty. I actually want to let this thing kind of float in there. That way, whenever there's torque on the engine and the engine moves, this thing can kind of move with the engine and not be so restricted and fixed to that battery tray mount. So I think the one side will help keep it in place enough that it's not going to go anywhere. For now, I'm going to keep it moving, get that one side bolted in, and get this thing in the car. What's up, YouTube? Back in the garage. This video is starting to get long, so I wanted to finish it, and it's kind of been spread out over multiple days, and weekends, actually, multiple weekends, probably for the last month. So I spent some time off camera doing all of the wiring necessary, except for the last two soldering joints. So basically, to get this pump running, get the intercooler installed, and finish off this video, and have a working water-to-air intercooler system. So let me go through what I did, and then I will finish it off and get it hooked up. So whenever you're wiring in something like a pump that is somewhat high amperage, you don't want to be running straight off of your ignition switch. You want some sort of relay. So basically what a relay does is it has a constant power straight from the battery, and then you wire in a trigger to it, which would come from your ignition switch. And whenever that ignition switch comes on, it triggers the relay to close, and provide that constant power to whatever source you're providing it to. So in my case, it would provide power to my pump. So first thing I did, obviously the battery usually sits right here, and as you guys have seen, the water intercooler is going to sit right here. So what I had to do first to kind of get everything routed where I wanted it is relocate the battery. That's easily done by just taking the two positive battery wires and flipping them around so that they go into your firewall instead of coming out this way. Then you stick your battery in here. You got your positive terminals coming out of the firewall, and you hook it straight up. And then the ground, you do the same. You unhook it and you send it through the firewall the other way. Mount it to the transmission where it normally grounds to the trans, and then I have it ground to the chassis as well, right there. So that's where the battery's gonna sit. I just need to make a battery tray for it, so I'll probably do something custom just to save some money. I'll just make a quick metal bracket for it to tie it down. And then now that I have my battery in place, I could go ahead and mount my relay where I wanted it. So a lot of times you'll see, you know, like a relay block where you'll have multiple relays, and you can run the constant power through all of them and then trigger each one individually however you need it. In my case, I think this may be the only thing I'm going to be using a relay to trigger. I could be wrong. If I'm wrong, I can add more later. But for now, I just decided to mount my one relay back here. And so out of your relay, what you have is your constant power that's coming into it. So that's this one here. That is fused. And then you have this black wire here as a ground. The white wire is my trigger coming from my ignition switch. And then the red wire here is what gets sent to my pump. So those wires run the whole way up here to the front. And what we have going on with the ignition switch, I once again just did a fuse tap to find a source. Basically, since that ignition switch is only triggering the relay, it's not going to draw a bunch of amps. So I feel fine about just a fuse tap like what I did, and just, you know, run a fuse in there and you're good to go. So that ignition switch then runs to this switch that I mounted on my dash. And that switch is what will turn on or cut off the power to the relay. So you can see, well, I guess you can't really see, but that runs to the switch. Switch runs on this blue wire the whole way back to the relay, and that is the trigger. So I can flip on and off that ignition switch to trigger my relay and to turn it off. So the ignition switch that my fuse tap is in is always on whenever the car is running. So that switch allows me to cut power to the pump. That is mainly so that I don't always have to have the pump running. You know, if my key is just in the car, my pump doesn't have to run. And I just wanted some way to be able to turn it off and not just have that pump constantly running. So then, like I said, that red wire is what runs to my pump. So I have that running in this yellow wire the whole way up to the front. That runs down through the firewall. And that leads out to this yellow wire that is poking down through here. And I also already have a ground wire that runs up into the firewall. So these two wires are what will connect to my Bosch pump that is in here. So I believe pink is power, and then this striped one here is ground. Obviously, with something like that, you could flip those and then your pump would be running backwards, which would not work correctly. So I'm gonna hook it up and then just make sure my pump's spinning the right way. So like I said, those last two wires are the last ones I need to hook up, and then that pump will be all wired in. I haven't tested anything up until this point, so I guess that maybe is dumb, but hopefully all my connections are good and everything should work fine. So I'll go ahead and get those two hooked up, and then we'll test her out. All right, the pump is wired in, so all that's left is to hook up the battery, flip my switch, and see what happens, I guess. I'm going to hook up the battery. Make sure nothing lights on fire. All right, so far so good. I hear it running. That thing's quieter than I thought it was gonna be, so hopefully it'll pump. All right, guys, we are back. We got Lake here, my brother, the supercharged Celica GTS guy, and YouTube loves that car. So if you haven't seen those videos, go check them out. They're on the channel. But Lake is here. He's gonna tell me what he thinks about my 2ZZ supercharger setup.
All right, I love it. You can end the video there.
So you hear that? It's good to go.
Like, comment, subscribe. We'll see you in the next one.
So as far as like similarities between the Blitz, it's kind of similar, right? The SC14 is Agura, same brand supercharger, similar sizing. So it'd be cool to see the two compared to each other, I guess, in the end. So
yeah.
But yeah, so we got this thing back together with the water intercooler sitting in there nice and snug. Got my mount on there holding it in place, so that is starting to all come together and look really nice. And I just threw my charge piping on here with the couplers and MAF and everything, and then I got my expansion tank in. So at this point, the cooling system for the water air intercooler is sealed off and ready to fill up with coolant. So we're going to find out if that pump is actually going to pump the water through and do what it needs to do. So yeah, we're going to fill it up with coolant and see what happens.
Let's do it.
Let's do it.
I'll be the camera guy.
Camera guy. It's nice having a camera guy once in a while.
Yeah.
So we're going with Toyota Red. Not that it matters because the system is not Toyota at all. So
it's OEM.
So I'm going to dump a little bit in, and then I guess I'll go check and see if anything's leaking before I get too far. That's actually really satisfying. So whenever I flip this, see if water starts moving. If coolant didn't get down to the pump yet,
there might be an air pocket.
What is up, guys? It is the next night. I am disappointed to say that we couldn't figure out why the system wasn't bleeding and the pump wasn't pumping last night. It was kind of frustrating, but today, luckily, I had a revelation, and after doing some research, I was able to put it together that my system that I had laid out is actually not ideal. So basically what we have is our tank that's providing, supposedly a steady state flow of fluid to the pump. But what I did wrong on this design is that I put the heat exchanger, which is a big restriction in the system, immediately before the pump. So basically the pump wants a steady state flow of fluid. That way it can have like a low pressure side that it's pulling in and then push that fluid to a high pressure side. So basically what was going on is my reservoir was supplying steady state flow to the heat exchanger, but because that was a restriction, it was causing some sort of cavitation in the pump is what I'm imagining was happening, because it couldn't keep up with the flow it needed. And so then it basically just couldn't pump fluid, couldn't bleed. It might have worked after the whole system was bled, but just because of the situation, it couldn't bleed. So what I did is I actually flipped the pump. I took it out of there, connected that hose, and then I flipped it over to this side where it goes into the heat exchanger. That way the pump is getting fed directly by the steady state flow from the reservoir. So reservoir, pump goes here, pushes it into the heat exchanger, and all my restrictions, heat exchanger and intercooler, are on the high pressure side of the pump. So if you're running into issues bleeding, that's most likely your problem. I was having a hard time believing that my pump wasn't powerful enough because basically everything that I've read told me it should have been flowing just fine. A lot smaller pumps were also flowing just fine on systems like these. So you can see now, and this has been running for a while now, you can see that my coolant is flowing and it hasn't missed a beat for the last 10 minutes probably. You can hear the pump going. You can hear the pump going, and you can also hear fluid moving around in the heat exchanger. You can feel the fluid moving through all the lines. So I'm gonna say that we can check that off the box. There's just a few clamps to tidy up. I need to resolder the wires on the pump. They're just twisted together right now. But for now, my water to air system is done. So I'm glad to say I can finally finish this video. It's been spanning over the last month. Multiple weekends I've been working on this and putting it together. Big system complete. And this thing is officially starting to look like it's coming together. And it is. That's because it is. So We're extremely close. I just got to hook up the rest of the charge piping, bead roll some pipes, get a belt for my supercharger. Then it's just a matter of hooking up the ECU and seeing what happens. So I'm leaving some things out of there, a lot of little things to finish up, but again, this was a really big one. Hopefully this helps somebody. All the parts that I use you can find down in the description, which may help you piece together your own system. So if this helped you out or you just enjoyed it, go ahead and leave a like. For now, that is all I got. Stay tuned for more cool stuff in the garage. So I'll see you guys later.